Would the US be doing better if we got rid of some states? That is a good, simple question. The answer is much more complicated. Today we look at what states Americans think we should pull a Survivor episode on them and vote them off the island, so to speak. This is all according to a survey we ran where we asked Americans to name the states they'd like to see gone. Some people listed a couple, and some apparently had an axe to grind with everything above the Mason-Dixon line. Now before we start, this list is not about whether these states should leave. It's about why a certain, loud, confident slice of Americans think the country would magically improve if these places just packed up their flags and took their problems elsewhere. This is satire, sarcasm, and social commentary. Not a succession plan, and not something we need to get all worked up about. Relax, it's fun. Let's take a look. Number 10, Indiana. Indiana tends to get dragged into these conversations because it exists quietly, efficiently, and without asking for attention, which somehow offends people who need every state to either entertain them or enrage them. To critics, Indiana represents the peak of nothing is happening, which in modern America is apparently a crime. Economically, Indiana gets labeled as a manufacturing relic that never fully upgraded their software. People love to point out factory towns, flat wages, and a reputation for being behind the times, as if half the country didn't benefit from the exact same industrial era Indiana powered through. Culturally, Indiana's sin is minding its own business. No major coastal cities, no dramatic scenery, no loud identity branding. That neutrality gets interpreted as irrelevance, which online critics confuse with uselessness. The irony? Indiana's boring stability is exactly what keeps the supply chains, logistic hubs, and transportation corridor functioning. But sure, let's kick it out because it didn't invent tech unicorns or they don't trend on TikTok every month. 54% of the respondents said they'd like to see Indiana hit the road. Number 9, New Jersey. After I saw the first episode of the Jersey Shore years and years ago, I thought, we could do without New Jersey. But it's not a bad state. New Jersey's critics believe the state contributes nothing but traffic, attitude, and toll booths. It's America's punching bag, close enough to New York and Philly to get blamed for both, while never getting credit for anything itself. People complain that New Jersey is overcrowded, overpriced, and aggressive. They say it's just one giant suburb with exit numbers instead of names. Somehow, that turns into an argument that the entire country would improve if New Jersey vanished into the Atlantic. But here's an inconvenient detail. New Jersey punches way above its weight economically. Ports, pharmaceuticals, finance, shipping, and logistics all flow through this state. Remove it, and the Northeast economy immediately develops a migraine. Critics don't want facts, though. They want vibes, and New Jersey's vibe is blunt, loud, and unapologetic. It scares people who prefer passive-aggressive silence. 56% of the respondents said they'd like to see New Jersey hit the bricks. Number 8, Minnesota. Minnesota gets dragged for being quietly smug. Critics accuse it of pretending to be polite while silently judging everyone else, which, to be fair, Minnesotans don't deny. Some argue Minnesota is too insulated, too cold, and too self-satisfied with its quality of life stats. They see the state as a place that constantly says, "We're doing fine, thanks," while the rest of the country spirals. Then there's the political reputation. Minnesota gets painted as a lecture state, one that wants to tell everyone how to run their schools, healthcare, and local government while pretending it's just trying to be helpful. The irony is Minnesota constantly ranks high in education, infrastructure, economic stability, and quality of life. Critics don't hate Minnesota because it fails, they hate it because it quietly works and makes it look easy. 56% of the respondents had Minnesota on their list. Number 7, Florida. Florida's critics believe the state single-handedly lowers America's IQ. Between bizarre headlines, public meltdowns, and weather events that look personal, Florida has become shorthand for chaos. People argue Florida drains federal resources through disaster relief while proudly pretending it doesn't need help. Hurricanes, flooding, insurance collapse, rinse, repeat, request aid, deny dependency. Then there's the migration paradox. Everyone complains about Florida, yet everyone keeps moving there. Critics see this as proof that Florida attracts chaos tourists who think low taxes cancel out everything else. Still, Florida does drive massive tourism revenue, trade, agriculture, and shipping. Removing it wouldn't fix America, it would just leave a very expensive, very wet hole in the economy. 58% of the people had Florida on their list. Number 6, Mississippi. Mississippi gets targeted because it often ranks near the bottom in income, healthcare, education, infrastructure, teeth, and age of consent laws. Critics use it as evidence that some states hold the country back, usually without acknowledging centuries of structural problems. Online arguments treat Mississippi like a moral failure rather than a policy challenge. People say that the state takes more than it gives, which it does, ignores reform, and resists change, conveniently ignoring how federal funding exists precisely to address uneven development. Sarcasm usually peaks with jokes about poverty rankings, literacy rates, and infrastructure, as if mocking the numbers fixes everything. And I'm guilty of this. It's what I do for a living. Mississippi isn't dragging America down, it's showing where America never fully showed up. Critics like myself just prefer ridicule to solutions. But I mean, that's what I do for a living. It's other people's jobs to fix things. 62% of the respondents had Mississippi on their list of states we could do without. Number 5, Arkansas. Arkansas confuses a lot of its critics. On one hand, it hosts some of the largest corporations in the country. On the other, much of the state struggles with poverty, healthcare access, and underinvestment. People argue Arkansas benefits from corporate success without spreading the gains evenly, turning it into a case study on uneven capitalism. They see it as proof that GDP doesn't equal quality of life, which it really doesn't. Sort of like when they tell you the stock market's doing great. Well, that doesn't change many people's lives unless you've got a ton of money in the stock market. Culturally, Arkansas gets dismissed as forgettable. It's not interesting enough to trend, not successful enough to brag about. In internet logic, that's like a crime. But Arkansas feeds supply chains, agriculture, retail logistics, and national distribution centers. People that want it gone and think we'd do better without Arkansas shop at the companies headquartered there. 65% of the people surveyed had Arkansas on their list. Number 4, Texas. Texas is a victim of its own success. People hate frontrunners. Human beings like middle of the road. If you excel, you suck. If you're below average, you're useless. This is amplified on the internet. So, Texas has been a very popular state for a couple decades now, and some people just don't like it. That being said, Texas does have some problems. It's not perfect. Haters point to the power grid failures, extreme weather, rapid growth, and policy contradictions as evidence that Texas overpromises and underdelivers. Then, of course, you have the independence rhetoric. That doesn't help. Texans always flap their gums about how Texas should be its own country. To this, some Americans say, sounds like a plan. See you later. Then, of course, you have the migration whiplash. Texas attracts millions, then struggles to keep infrastructure, housing, and services aligned with the growth. Critics say it's proof that big talk doesn't equal big planning. So about 67% of the people surveyed had an axe to grind and would like to see Texas go their own way. Number 3, West Virginia. West Virginia always seems to be in a death match with Mississippi for the worst state. I think it's got some problems. I don't think it's anywhere near the worst state. But a lot of people see the headlines, a lot of people know the story of West Virginia, and they think this place needs to go. West Virginia gets targeted because it symbolizes decline in the public imagination. Coal population loss, health struggles, critics lump it all together and call it a lost cause. People argue that the state clings to industries that no longer exist the way they want it to exist. You always hear these things about coal's coming back. That would be wonderful for West Virginia and probably Pennsylvania and a couple other states if it did. Sadly, the world is moving beyond coal. If you look at, let's say, the last 5 or 6 years, in 2019 to 2020, coal usage declined 4.26%. In 2021, it dropped by 2.58%. In 2022, it dropped another 0.75%, so not that much. In 2023, they dropped 3.5%, and again in 2024, it dropped another 3.5%. In 2024, coal generated about 19.5% of the electricity used in the United States. This, of course, leads to fewer and fewer jobs, which means poorer and poorer people need more money from the US government. I mean, the state's been in desperate need of an economic pivot for decades. But it takes money to do that, and West Virginia doesn't have a bunch of money. My opinion, West Virginia doesn't need to leave America. It needs to realize that its main industry that they've relied on forever will never come back to its former glory. 71% of the people in the survey had West Virginia on their list to get the boot. Number 2, Utah. This one sort of blew me away because Utah overall is a decently run state, but like we learned with Texas, If you're doing good, people don't like you. The good news is Salt Lake City's starting to decline a little bit, so in a few years, people won't really care. But Utah gets criticized for being culturally insular. Outsiders see dominant religious influence and assume the entire state runs on one worldview. Critics argue that the Mormon church controls the entire state, which they'll say they don't, but everybody knows they do. This, of course, makes it feel more like a system than a state, and a lot of people feel because of this religious overtone in the state that it doesn't fit modern America. Ironically, Utah consistently ranks high in economic growth, employment, and family stability, which only annoys critics even more. Overall, I'm completely shocked Utah even made the list, but number 2? I'm blown away. 73% of the people had Utah on their list of states that need to go. All right, before we get to number 1, let me know in the comment section, which state do you think should have been on here and which state do you think shouldn't have been on here? All right, on to number 1. And number 1, California. No kidding. California is everyone's punching bag these days. It got too expensive and it chased a lot of longtime residents out. Now, for the first time since 1849, California lost some population back in like 21 and 22. They're starting to gain again. People have always moved there and people still move there to this day. I mean, by the millions. The difference was more were leaving than coming in for a couple years. Of course, this, made all the critics of California in Texas, Florida, and all the southern states just trash the state. It's become the poster child for political diversity. And again, like Texas, they make a lot of money. They're a front runner in almost every category in the United States, including some bad ones like cost of living and housing, wildfires, homeless, and dudes named Tyler that drive convertible BMWs on the 405 freeway. So most critics that don't understand economics see California as a cautionary tale instead of a complex economy. People argue that California distorts national politics, drains resources, and projects a lifestyle that 99% of us can't afford. It gets blamed for everything from housing inflation to social media burnout. The contradiction, though? California generates enormous economic output, innovation, agriculture, entertainment, and global influence. Removing it wouldn't fix America, it would fundamentally break it. I was watching this TED Talk and this guy was talking about how if California did leave the United States and let's say went to Canada, it would send the remaining portion of the United States into the Second Great Depression. So critics don't want California gone because it fails. They want it gone because it's powerful, messy, and impossible to ignore. 83% of the respondents to the survey had California on its list of states that need to go. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, be nice to each other.